Welcome everyone, and welcome back to those of you who joined us yesterday. It's great to see all of you today. My name is Lauren Manier, and I am a program associate at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and I work on the AAAS IUSE initiative. We are excited to bring you today's working session, which is the second of a two-part series titled Pedagogical Professional Development from individual change to community empowerment. If you missed yesterday, that's okay, and you should still stick around and participate in today's session. Today you'll be hearing from Leilani Arthurs, Mike Chulin Chang, Carly Flogan, Pierre Min-Sung Liu, and Patrick Shabrom. As a reminder, this session is being recorded. However, breakout rooms will not be recorded. Closed captioning is also available, and you can download and view the full transcript by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. We are also asking folks on the call to add their institution to their Zoom name, and you can do this by clicking the More or the ... button in the upper corner of your screen. So you should see it where you are in your little icon, and just add your institution after your name. Additionally, be sure to join us in the conversation on Twitter by using hashtag IUSEinsights, and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn at AAAS IUSE Initiative or at IUSE Program. Additionally, we've received a few questions about recordings and slides from the Summer Labs workshop, and you can find those on the Summer Labs archive page of our website, and recording will be posted from this session and yesterday's session in the coming days. So before we begin, I wanted to bring your attention to a few upcoming sessions. Tomorrow we will feature a workshop titled Utilizing a Principles-Focused Approach for Change Efforts, and this workshop will take place at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And we hope to see everyone on June 22nd for the Developing a New Faculty Model to Improve Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Dr. David Asai from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute will provide the keynote address, which will be followed by 3 concurrent conversations focusing on systemic issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion at the faculty level. So we hope you can join us and the expert speakers on June 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Now I would like to turn it over to our speakers today to lead us in this working session. So Dr. Arthurs, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. All right, so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this working session today. No matter where you might be on the planet today, and no matter what time it might be where you find yourselves. If you were here for yesterday's workshop, we're happy that you decided to join us again for today's working session. And if you're joining us for the first time today, welcome, and we invite you to stay. To participate with us as much as possible during today's working session, we recommend that you use a desktop computer or a laptop instead of a smartphone or a tablet or some other small device. So a laptop or a desktop computer will probably help to ease your experience in participating in the working session today. So our project is a collaboration between 3 different institutions, and representatives from each of our institutions will briefly introduce themselves and their institutions, beginning with Patrick from Front Range Community College. So I'll turn it over to you, Patrick.
Hello, I'm Patrick Shabrom. I am a geography professor at Front Range Community College in Fort Collins, Colorado. I am a co-PI with Leilani and the lead here at Front Range Community College. Carly?
Hi, everybody. My name is Carly Flogan. I'm also at Front Range Community College. I work as support staff for the Primers Grant. I'm really excited to be here. I'll turn it over to Mike.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Chulin Chang. I'm associate professor here at University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. I'm a geohydrologist. I'm the local lead for the project PA.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pierre Mingtan Liu. I'm an education researcher, and I serve as the co-PI for the Primus project at UTRGV. I do a lot of education research, and some of my research interests include STEM education and the scholarship of teaching and learning. Now back to Leilani.
Thanks, Pierre. Hi, everyone. I'm Leilani Arthurs, and I'm a geologist and a discipline-based education researcher at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And I'm the lead for our institution. And Amanda McAndrew works in what's called our asset office. And she's a co-lead and strong partner in our work at CU Boulder for this project.
Just to kind of go over a little bit of what we did yesterday. We recalled reasons why active learning strategies, student-centered instruction, why they're not widely implemented in STEM courses. And then we talked a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of different types of professional development, pedagogical professional development, including short-term versus sort of longer-term types of professional development. And that is, we compared the approaches to different types of professional development for STEM at 3 different institutions, the 3 institutions that are part of this project. And we prepared ourselves to discuss and develop sort of actionable plans to improve the pedagogical professional development for STEM faculty. And that takes us to today. So for today's session, we're going to, I'll wait for Leilani to, okay, great. Draft an actionable plan to improve the pedagogical professional development for STEM faculty at your home institutions, and how to influence professional development programs, and then get some feedback on those plans, both to people who you're familiar with and people who are new, and then exchange some ideas and information on how, through inter-institutional cross-pollination of ideas and experiences, that we may be able to propagate some of these ideas for improving pedagogical professional development. So I will kick it back to Leilani and let her explain what we're doing today.
Thank you, Patrick. So as Patrick described, today, one of our desired outcomes for this working session is for participants to be able to start drafting ultimately what would be an action plan. So to get to that point, everyone today has the opportunity to begin developing, first of all, an inventory of the professional development offerings at your home institutions. And the purpose for doing the work of inventorying what's available is to provide a background research basis that you can use as you go on to draft your action plans. And then the next thing that you'll do after the inventory is to perform a gap analysis. And part of that gap analysis includes the action plan. And the gap analysis is intended for you to characterize the current state of professional development offerings at your institution, and then to envision a future desired state of professional development offerings at your home institution, and then to compare those 2 states. And then to draft the action plan that could help you and your institution manifest that desired future state. And then the third thing that we had an opportunity to work on together today is something called a SWOT analysis. And this goes hand in hand with the action plan. So this type of analysis will help to identify potential strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that might be linked to the draft action plan that you developed today. And it's a useful tool for thinking of how to iterate upon and revise the action plan. So at this juncture, I'd like to say that these three tools are really helpful no matter what project you might find yourself working on in the future. But we're using it in the context of thinking about professional development programming at our home institutions. So before we move on from this particular slide, does anybody have questions at this point? Okay, so our tentative agenda, the timing is, flexible and we can wiggle around. So for part one, this is where we were envisioning folks could work independently to do the inventory related to their PD offerings at their institutions. And if anyone here is on the line with a colleague from the same institution and you want to work together to do the inventory, then you can also do that. And at the same time, you'll also then move on to work on the gap analysis and then the SWOT analysis during that 30-minute time period. And again, there's some wiggle room. So if you want more or less time, we'll check in the different spots at different times. Okay, and then with part two, this is where we were envisioning placing people in small groups to get some inter-institutional cross-pollination of ideas. So you could be with your partner from before if you want, if you were at the same institution, but then you could also join some people from other institutions so that you could learn from their experience, because every institution is so different. We have different structures, different infrastructure, different resources, and bounce around ideas and learn from each other. And then the last part of the working session, we were envisioning having a whole group discussion where groups can share out some of the more salient themes or ideas that came up in your small group discussions. We hope that you had some wonderfully productive discussions with your colleagues in the breakout rooms. And just to be attentive to the time, knowing some people need to sign off or might have already signed off, I think. I just wanted to bring you all back to the main breakout room so that you could share some of the ideas that came up in your discussions regarding the high impact gaps that you thought of for your existing projects, and maybe some of the solutions that you all were able to brainstorm together. And then in this way, there can be some cross exchange of ideas between the different breakout rooms as well. So would anybody like to share? Oh, and Anya, looks like one of the breakout rooms is in the middle of an idea. So do you want to wrap up that idea before we move into talking about the high priority gaps? That might be a good way to like segue into.
So we were in a breakout room that started with projects, and gosh, it feels like it was very productive, but I don't know if I can wrap my brain around summarizing. But what I, like one of my kind of the community I'm here representing, the Genomics Education Partnership, one of our goals is to expand and kind of bring in more community college faculty kind of on board. And we are we have a few members who are really active, but one of the things we're running into is reward system. It seems very different. And so I was hoping to talk to Patrick afterwards about how he got involved and kind of where he sees the problems there. But I'm not sure it's an applicable question to institutional kind of transformation through PD.
Oh, I think that the question of reward systems could potentially be a really important gap for projects looking to create programs that are sustainable. So certainly I would invite Patrick to respond to your query.
Well, and I think we kind of had that. I mean, that's part of this within our own program. The sort of the way that participants in our professional development and the follow-up component to the professional development are compensated between the three institutions are different. where, the initial thought is that we would have, grants, that people could apply for grants to sort of redesign their courses. And we don't really compensate people. I mean, we do have some grants but really, we have this sort of mode of contracts when you're off campus, or when you're off contract kind of thing. And so we kind of had to adapt our program a little bit differently based upon the sort of the terminology and the way that we generally tend to think of the compensation. People have pretty large teaching loads, and there are reassignments within those teaching loads, but then there's also a lot of people are also teaching overloads, and really a typical pay structure for me at my college could be 3 different rates, depending upon whether or not I'm doing this, on an hourly rate above and beyond what my normal pay is, whether or not it's counted as overload credits or whether or not it's counted as my regular load. And I don't say that that's, completely unique. I know that there are similar things at the 4 years, but sometimes just talking the same language can be a little bit difficult, just because we don't think of it in terms of, we don't always think of it in terms of release time. I guess release time is the term that's commonly used, because you don't always, necessarily get that luxury to think of it as release time. Stipends is probably a better way to sort of compensate people, if I'm answering the question there.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to give an example that we are a community that tries to bring in research to all students, like in STEM, through a course-based undergraduate research experiences. And so the way we've approached it, or like the currency of like what's rewarded in a 4-year institution, publication counts for something. We've published with our undergraduates like 1,000 co-author paper where 900 undergraduate students, 100 are faculty. And what our community college colleagues say is, yeah, except my institution doesn't count for anything. That's not a currency that exists. And when I add on doing research with my students, yes, it might bring them to success like later, but I don't get to see it because their success would be in the 3rd, 4th year when they transfer and they have that confidence, right? And like how, like that's a part that I'm really kind of struggling with. Is it feels like it's a research we know is an important part. We can bring it broadly to almost everyone, but this institutional sort of reward structure appears to be a barrier, right? And what Patrick earlier said, and I totally he said in our breakout room, a lot of people come to community college and say, hey, we have something for you. You don't know what you're doing, but we'll teach you. That is not how we approach it. And I also take insult from that as a community college student. That's how I got started, right? And so, yeah, that's kind of where my troubles are. And thank you for
yeah, and if you're talking the language of community college faculty, you're talking the language of student success, really. There was a little bit of conversation in your group a little bit about that, or about students in other disciplines, right? And one of the ways that we've been kind of framing our conversations here a little bit about sort of an emphasis on STEM is an emphasis a little bit on equity, where there is a disproportional number of students. So we have a high number of of underrepresented students at our institution, but a lot of them are majoring in non-STEM fields. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the earning potentials for a lot of students, and I hate to, to come out and say it, but, from an equity perspective, if we're getting a lot more diversity within our STEM fields, then, the long-term societal benefit should be that people who come from certain groups that generally tend to be on average of a lower socioeconomic place, there's a greater opportunity for mobility within those populations, because we're basically trying to improve the access for all our students, not just our underrepresented students, but for all of our students into some of these STEM fields, which generally tend to be to have a higher market potential. So student success is a buzzword that you find a lot at the two-year colleges. And anytime you can sort of frame it around students is always good language to use. And it sounds like you are partnering with a few folks at the community colleges, and I'm probably not telling you anything new. So,
well, and I'm wondering if the part of the issue, if I understand, Anya, is that the likelihood of success or progress for a student is recognized years after the intervention, right? Can you tease that apart and figure out what is a sign of progress or success right after the intervention, and use it as leverage essentially to whoever they're going to, and say, I've got this population of students who are now better prepared to do what you want them to do. And here's the data that shows that, right? And then if you're able to follow up and find out how well they did years down the road, but at least recognize the person who got them a little further along than the students who don't go through that program, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I'll be honest and say one of the biggest downfalls sometimes at the two-year colleges is that we have a lot of professional development. We don't have a lot of research as to whether or not that professional development, what it actually achieved. And a lot of that just becomes, is a direct result of, we may have an idea based on, our experience in the classroom or grades or, everything else, but we don't really have the capacity necessarily to be able to track what that translates into after they leave our classroom.
Right. So I think that's I don't know if other states are doing it, but California now has a free first-year college. I think it might be expanding. And so a lot of people there's a big push for more people going through community college transferring, but we need institutions to talk to each other using institutional data, right? And right now, I think there's a lot of guards around that data for good reason, for privacy, but infrastructure wise, we need to find a way to connect the dots there. And thank you. I don't mean to derail. I'm curious how the other group went, and I'd love to hear about the other breakout room.
From the other breakout rooms, we have Pierre and Kim left. Either one of you want to share what the high priority gaps you discussed, or any other aspects that came up in your discussion?
I think all of us had fairly different gaps because we were just coming from different perspectives. I think it was Donald, who disappeared, was interested in how faculty participating in professional development related to teaching, how could that be integrated in your tenure and promotion process? And by looking at how it's in your tenure and promotion process as a proxy for the university's value of teaching and quality teaching. And so we kind of talked about what we have at our different institutions, and which is not like any big, wonderful policy on doing something like that. And sort of just some strategy of how maybe it could be implemented including going individual departments, personnel committees could potentially make the change. And then Kevin was bringing up trying to have some sort of measurement of teaching quality is like the big conversation to have, and not just student evaluations for what's quality teaching. So that was one thing. I was looking at, I'm going to be sort of leading a series of workshops for faculty who are DBers, so the discipline-based education researchers. And so I was kind of trying to see, what do I already have at my university? And I see things that are about like teaching in general, and I have some stuff about like just research in general, but not anything for that. And we were sort of brainstorming that probably folks in faculty development would be happy to, if I could really narrow down my list of things that I'm looking for these workshops. I'm like, I need to go back to everyone's like application essay for getting in the program. What exactly do they need? But it was recommended that, like, if say we want to talk about one about qualitative and quantitative, and then also come up with specifically, oh, you should go talk to, you know, Allie or George or whomever is like actually really good at that, and be happy to go talk to someone who's a novice. Have some of those resources already planned with some sort of recommendation to help, because we're going to have a mixture of people who are brand new to it and some folks who are experienced that just want community. So kind of trying to balance that. So that was a gap in existing professional development, I guess, faculty development of how do you help someone who wants to do this area of teaching and learning as their research. And then Kevin, who does work in that their learning center in the provost, associate provost level, his gap was he knows what is going on at the university level because he's in that division, but he's curious what sort of professional development for teaching and learning is occurring in the colleges and the departments. And he didn't want to come in and like step on everyone's toes and be like, I'm, you know, throwing my elbows, I'm in charge of everything. Like, he didn't want to be like, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. You know, he wanted to like get some strategies for how not to offend people, but still gather this information. And so we recommended that he approach it as he's trying to gather like a website of resources, and then follow through when he's got that, so that other faculty could, you know, I'm in the College of, you know, Liberal Arts, and therefore, oh, look, here's the things that are not just university wide, but in my college that I could go and do. So he could be a resource for people that way. Because I'm certain that, you know, if you're looking through faculty development, you'd love to see it as like, oh, here's something else that I could do because I'm in this college or whatnot. So, and thank you to Anya for posting that in the chat. So I will click on the link so it pulls it up in my web browser. So anyways, those were we had 3 main people sharing gaps, and we're all really different, but we tried our best to help each other out.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Kim. And were there any other high priority gaps that the community of practice breakout room wanted to share with us, for those of us who weren't in the discussion, like Kim, for example?
I think it's humorous that Kim is talking about doing workshops for DBER, when that was one of the things that came up in our session as well. Is what is DBER, and how do we train people to be able to do DBER? And so, yes, I wrote down your name, Kim, because I'm like, oh, I want to talk to you about that.
That'd be great. I love it.
Ask maybe for organizers to share, since you have the experience of doing this professional development at the 3 institutions, like are there like what was your kind of gap, you know, the key gap that you were able to close? And do you change your mind now, having gone through the project so far? Like, how did it change, I guess, for you?
Oh, well, I love your optimism, Anya, in saying that we've closed it. So we're like halfway through our project, and we're still working on strategies to develop sustainable models for what we're doing at each of our institutions. But I think one of the common gaps that we shared that brought us together, and then, you know, Pierre, Mike, and Patrick, you can jump in as you wish. But from my perspective, I think one of the common gaps that brought us together is that historically at our institutions, there really has been an absence of sustained long-term scaffolded professional development. So, you know, many STEM faculty who teach undergraduate courses are experts in their discipline, but many have not ever received formal pedagogical training on teaching methods, for example, or how to design a course or learning goals. And so while each of those topics could be a standalone 50-minute workshop that they might attend, somewhere in their career, there really hasn't been this sort of guided, shepherded experience systematically learning about pedagogy. And so that was something that brought us together as a gap that we saw at our institutions that we could work on together. And so that's sort of what was the cause for the birth of the project that we're pursuing together. And I would love to say, Anya, that we have solved the sustainability question, but we have not yet. I think of the three institutions, probably the one that I would say is the closest getting there right now, if we had to describe it as a horse race, would be FRCC. They have really been able to leverage other grants and existing programs to get to where they are, where I feel like as an outsider to the institution, I can see it manifesting itself. And then I would say, if it was a horse race, prior to last week, I would say CU Boulder was also very close to like sort of, clinching a sustainable model. But then we had a total upset with some of the infrastructure at our institution, including the shuffling of key staff members. And so now it's a big question mark on my end of where that's going to go. But on Monday, I actually met with our partner to talk about, the future of this kind of PD programming at our institution. So I now am optimistic. Before it was just a very big question mark. Now I'm optimistically question mark. And then I think at UTRGV, the COVID pandemic has really thrown a wrench into their plans. And so, yeah, I don't know if Patrick and Mike and Pierre, you want to add anything before we move into the final closing and make sure Lauren has some time to give her final announcements. But
sure. I'll add. I mean, it's very exciting to a certain extent that in a way we're in year 3 on our project, and in a way we're kind of achieving some of the things that I hope to get to by year 5 of our project in terms of the sustainability for an active learning professional development. And we hadn't been able to sustain it. We have some professional developments that we were offering semester to semester. And now it seems like the college is kind of buying into it. And I will have to say that the most successful professional developments have come out from faculty. And sometimes getting sort of institutional buy-in at the administrative level is the hardest thing. And I will have to say that having the NSF grant behind our particular professional development, having a grant offered a little bit of a how can I put it, a validity to our efforts in that regards within our institution to say, yes, this is a worthwhile thing for us to be doing. And we just made the point that it needed to be sustainable. That being said, in terms of professional development in general, since they do tend to be faculty driven, we have found in the past that when somebody leaves, if it's being driven by a particular faculty member and that faculty member retires or ends up leaving, the program sort of dies in that regards. That's one of the things that we've seen. And so part of what we're hoping to do is to create a system in where it's sort of so ingrained in the institution that doesn't happen when funding goes away or somebody leaves, the person behind it or whatever else may be involved to sort of disrupt the momentum of the program. Hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you, Patrick. And Mike and Pierre, did you want to add any final thoughts before we wrap up the session?
Yes, I could also comment and contribute to this closing also. I think that a lot of the issues that we have discussed in the community of practice is actually the components that we already included in Primer's project, like how the department or colleges would evaluate the PD's value during our faculty evaluation. And of course, different types of the institutions, the resources are different, and the evaluations are also different. We are in the middle of our project. Of course, there are delays in terms of the COVID. We will be happy to share our experience and exchange ideas for the sustainability planning or future grant applications. So that's my short comments that I want to share.
Great, thanks, Mike. Pierre, did you want to add anything?
I just want to say that thank you all for coming. And one thing that I heard, and I'm still quite impressed and touched, is that knowing that CU is a research tier 1 university. And then they have this slogan motto when we visited, and they say, it's like posted almost everywhere, saying that we're an R1, but we also want to be a T1. So they want to be teaching, they want to do very well teaching excellence there. So for most of us, I think we can at least learn that, we should all try to do well for our students. So that's my little thought. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pierre. And I'm just gonna quickly wrap us up by sharing my screen and just acknowledge our program officer and the AAAS IUSE team. Thank you for having us. And thank you everyone who came to the working session. We really enjoyed your participation and wish you the very best in all of your institutional transformation efforts and projects. And we may stay on for questions if people are here. And then Lauren has some closing remarks.
Thank you, Leilani, Mike, Carly, Pierre, and Patrick. I'd also like to thank our AAAS IUSE team, Jennifer Crincy, Iris Wagstaff, and Thomas Bagu. And thank you to all of you who joined us today. We would love to hear what you thought of this session, so please take a minute to fill out the post-session survey. All feedback is anonymous, and we would really appreciate to hear what you thought of the session today. As a reminder, the recording will be available on our AAAS IUSE Summer Labs page, and the recording from yesterday will be available as well later this week. So thank you again for joining. We hope to see you tomorrow at the Utilizing a Principles-Focused Approach for Change Efforts workshop. That's happening at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So thank you all again for joining.